In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, December 15th, here in South Korea. A senior presidential official believes Pyongyang may launch an intercontinental ballistic missile within this year, underscoring the need for a quick adoption of a trilateral missile warning system among Seoul, Tokyo and Washington. Meanwhile, the latest economic indicators show signs that a slowdown in Korea's economy are indeed easing amid rebounds in production and exports, as well as a strong job market. And over in the US, Wall Street responds to prospects of interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve in the year ahead, with a powerful rally that saw the Dow Jones gaining 158 points, or 0.4%, on Thursday. Pyongyang may launch an ICBM before the year's end. Now, this grim outlook comes amid plans to put into practice a missile warning system shared by Seoul, Tokyo and Washington also within this year. Our correspondent Peunji starts us off.
A senior presidential official has said there is a possibility that North Korea could launch an intercontinental ballistic missile this month. The first deputy chief of the National Security Office, Kim Tae-yo, said this as he arrived in Washington, D.C. for a high-profile meeting. He did not elaborate on what intelligence led him to believe so, or if related information has been shared with the U.S., but added that a ballistic missile launch using ICBM technology is a subject of extended deterrence discussions between Seoul and Washington. He also noted that regardless of the range of the ballistic missile, if a nuclear weapon is loaded onto it, it is a nuclear threat and an attack against South Korea. Kim is scheduled to take part in the second meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group, a security meeting designed to discuss nuclear and strategic planning issues between Seoul and Washington. In the meantime, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan plan to start sharing data on North Korean missiles in real time. The Pentagon spokesperson said in a briefing on Thursday local time that the three countries are working together to operationalize the system by the end of 2023.
That we are hard at work on delivering on those agreements. We are on schedule to deliver by the end of this year.
His remarks come a day after the White House National Security Council Senior Director for East Asia and Oceania, Mira Rapp-Hooper, said the data sharing system is expected to become operational within the next few days. Earlier in August, the leaders of the three countries agreed to step up efforts to counter evolving North Korean nuclear missile threats. Peunji, Arirang News.
And U.S. lawmakers have passed their defense policy bill for next year. The National Defense Authorization Act for 2024 is worth over $886 billion, up 3% on year. The act includes intentions to maintain the 28,500 U.S. service members currently stationed in South Korea. It also seeks to strengthen Washington's commitment to extended deterrence for Seoul and calls for updates on progress in the transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S. to South Korea. The act now awaits President Joe Biden's signature. Israel has shared sobering prospects of a prolonged warfare with Hamas, while the Palestinian militant group itself claims negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza are underway. Our Isingja covers the latest events.
During U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's visit to Tel Aviv, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told a White House official that the war could last more than several months for Hamas to be defeated. Gallant told Sullivan that the Palestinian militant group had built infrastructure under the ground and above the ground, making it difficult to destroy them all. During Sullivan's visit, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed that his country will continue to fight until absolute victory against Hamas is achieved. Meanwhile, a senior official from Hamas said Thursday that serious talks are underway to revive the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. According to Germany's DPA news agency, the Hamas said Qatari and Egyptian officials are negotiating with Israel and the United States on behalf of the militant group. He added that there will be no exchange of Israeli hostages or Palestinian prisoners until the ceasefire goes into effect. With around 327,000 cases of infectious diseases being detected in Gaza, a spokesperson for the Palestinian Ministry of Health warns that Gaza faces the spread of epidemics, infectious diseases, malnutrition, and the lack of clean drinking water and personal hygiene. The chief spokesperson for UNICEF also warned that the perfect storm for disease has begun in the region, with 21 of the Gaza Strip's 36 hospitals closed. Gaza's health officials warned that diseases are spreading even faster, with many displaced in overcrowded shelters. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Seoul's latest economic report card shows signs of a slowdown are indeed easing. Our Park Gun-woo reports.
South Korea's economic slowdown is continuing to ease, according to the Finance Ministry's monthly economic green book released on Friday. The ministry said the economic slowdown is gradually easing due to recovery in production and manufacturing industry exports, including semiconductors, and in employment figures. In contrast, the report highlighted a drop in retail sales in October, as well as low economic sentiment over the previous months, while the composite consumer sentiment index for November dropped 0.9 percentage points on month. The ministry said it would need to come up with solutions to narrow these discrepancies. Meanwhile, total exports in November came to $55.8 billion, an increase of 7.8% on year. By item, 12 out of 15 major exporting items, including ships, vehicles, and chips, saw an increase. And 6 out of 9 main outbound shipping regions, including the US, Japan, and India, saw a jump in exports as well. In terms of employment in November, 277,000 jobs were added on year, a smaller increase than the month before due to the base effect caused by eased COVID-19 measures. Though unemployment increased by 11,000, the unemployment rate was the same as last year at 2.3%. At a briefing on Friday, a finance ministry official also cited global uncertainties, including geopolitical risks from ongoing wars and unstable supply chains that could hinder economic recovery, adding the government would strengthen efforts toward economic recovery despite the uncertainties.
The government will focus on stabilizing people's livelihoods, including consumer prices, and further strengthen efforts so that the export recovery expands to the whole economy.
Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Now, as reported on a few occasions in recent days, authorities here are working to tackle the danger of dependence with regard to key raw materials, especially in light of the latest concerns over urea supplies here in the country. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin files this report.
Fears over a potential repeat of the urea shortage crisis in 2021 after China's recent urea export delays have exposed the need for South Korea to diversify its supply chains. Although only around 22% of urea fertilizers came from China this year, China accounted for a whopping 91% of urea for vehicles and industrial use. But the circumstances behind the export halts are different. In 2021, Beijing halted urea exports amid a trade row with Australia, but this time it's from China experiencing a surge in domestic prices due to increased demand from nations like India, meaning the export controls may not be long-lasting. We visited a gas station to see what the situation was like. I'm here at a large gas station chain that's frequented by many truck drivers as it's located near Incheon Port. Let's go find out if its supply of urea solution is meeting the demand. An employee confirmed that there's enough pumped DEF and they haven't witnessed the long queues from 2 years ago. But he said the demand for the DEF in containers is higher than usual.
The DEF in containers does get sold out almost as soon as it comes in. It's actually sold out today, but we're not experiencing any dramatic delays in orders.
While the situation appears to be not as serious as it was in 2021, China is restricting exports of other key raw materials like ammonium phosphate, 95% of which comes from China. As such, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho and related ministers earlier this week announced that the government will be extending the tariff rate quota on urea and ammonium phosphate to the end of 2024. The Industry Ministry also announced on Wednesday that it plans to reduce South Korea's reliance on specific nations for key items by 2030. This will be done through achieving self-sufficiency, diversifying import sources, and stockpiling raw material inventories. One expert says that policies based on providing financial incentives will likely prove to be the most effective.
To increase domestic production and diversify import sources, the government needs to provide tax cuts, subsidies, and reduce shipping costs to compete with China's competitive prices.
While it may take time for these policies to prove effective, they will hopefully be a step forward in preventing another shortage crisis from happening. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, K-food exports, if you will, hit a fresh high during the first 11 months of this year. According to Seoul's Agriculture and Food Ministry, their value amounted to almost $83 billion for the January to November period, up 2.4% on year. Officials say exports of Korea's ramyeon and kimchi led the surge, expanding close to 26% and 10% respectively. Popular destinations were China and the US. And over in the U.S., a robust rally on Wall Street pushed the Dow Jones Industrial Average to a fresh high on Thursday amid prospects of rate cuts by the Federal Reserve next year. Our An Sung-jin has more.
U.S. stocks and other economic indicators are up on expectations that the Federal Reserve will cut its interest rates next year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a stock market index of 30 prominent companies listed on stock exchanges in the U.S., closed at a record high on Thursday. Its rally continued after Wednesday's market closed above 37,000 for the first time ever. The Nasdaq also closed 0.2% higher and the S&P 500 closed 0.3% higher on Thursday. Meanwhile, the 10-year Treasury note dropped below 4% for the first time since August, as traders expected rate cuts 3 times in 2024. Following the Federal Open Market Committee's announcement that it may lower interest rates, the U.S. dollar also dropped to a 4-month low. On the back of weaker dollars, oil prices settled 3% higher as the West Texas Intermediate contract for January settled at $71.58 a barrel. As inflation shows signs of easing in the U.S., retail sales in November climbed 0.3%, seeing a rebound from the 0.2% decline in October. Forecasts that the U.S. could lower its interest rates are seen as a positive for South Korea's economy and could allow the Bank of Korea to lower its interest rates. This may stabilize South Korea's property market and reduce household loan costs. However, South Korea's inflation remains high, and even if the Bank of Korea does drop its interest rates are unlikely to fall to the COVID-19 pandemic level of 1 or 2%. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the European Central Bank is holding its interest rate steady for the second session in a row. Bank officials on Thursday announced intentions to keep their rate at 4.5%, but shared no prospects of a rate cut going forward, amid belief that inflation may witness a brief rise in the near future as price pressures remain firmly in place. Keeping in mind the BOK's rate of 3.5%, the rate difference between the two entities now stands at 1 percentage point. And in local news, starting today, that is December 15th, a greater number of people living in Korea's remote regions are eligible for telemedicine services. Our Yoon-jin explains.
In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, telemedicine services were first initiated in South Korea in 2020. And starting Friday, the contactless healthcare service will be expanded as part of the government's efforts to address gaps in medical care services. Telemedicine services have already been available for people residing in remote areas like islands and mountainous and isolated areas at night and on holidays. But now the services will be extended to 98 additional cities, counties, and districts identified as medically vulnerable areas starting December 15th. These are areas where the percentage of residents unable to reach a regional emergency medical center within 30 minutes exceeds 30%. The Health Ministry has also expanded the age group of people allowed to receive prescriptions using the telemedicine services. Those aged under 18 were only allowed contactless counseling services after 6 p.m. and on holidays, but now the service will be available to all age groups, including prescriptions. Contactless healthcare has also been expanded nationwide to allow returning patients to receive telemedicine treatment for general illnesses if they have any previous medical treatment records at the same hospital in the previous 6 months. For returning patients with specific or chronic diseases, they need to have treatment records for that disease at the same hospital in the previous 30 days. Previously, the services had only been available for returning patients with diseases like diabetes or hyperphagia. Morning after pills are prohibited from the prescription list. 이은진, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank remains cautiously optimistic about Asia's economic prospects in 2024, but acknowledges the presence of tangible risk factors. Our business correspondent Moon Hyun-yeon sat down with the bank's top economist.
Amid external conflict and unusual weather posing challenges this year, Asia's economic outlook going into 2024 remains solid. The Asian Development Bank's December report on Wednesday showed the region's growth has been upbeat on the back of strong domestic demand and the recovery in the tourism sector. However, the agency's chief economist, Albert Park, discussed how certain trends are affecting the region's economies.
So, unfortunately, we live in a world where there's been a lot of geopolitical kind of tensions, and we've had sanction regimes, trade wars, and other industrial policies that are kind of erecting barriers to free trade. And we think that's not healthy for the region because Asia in particular historically has really benefited a lot from open trade and export-led growth.
As well as geopolitical tensions, other factors such as unusual weather and slowing global demand in certain industries have raised concerns about supply chains. South Korea has experienced food security challenges as a result of the heat wave which swept through the country this summer. And recent disruptions in urea exports from China have highlighted a need to reduce dependence on a single source of key materials.
We hope that countries can think together about how to make, number one, make agriculture more resilient to supply shocks, but then also think ahead and come up with plans where countries do not overly restrict their trade when there is a negative shock, because that really hurts the most vulnerable countries, and to think about instead protecting consumers through more targeted policy measures.
Despite these headwinds, the ADB revised its 2023 growth estimate for Asia, raising it by 0.2 percentage points from its earlier forecast in September. Its projection for South Korea remained unchanged, but the country's main export sector could be seeing a recovery.
Well, we're cautiously optimistic. Not just Korea, but the global semiconductor market has kind of bottomed out earlier this year, and we're seeing a recovery in global demand. The U.S. economy is growing a bit faster, than we had expected earlier, which helps.
With the Fed's decision to keep interest rates steady for the third consecutive month on Thursday, it's predicted to lower rates in 2024, which is welcome news for the region.
I think the lower interest rates are better for the region because high interest rates really put financial pressure. It raises the cost of capital and investment. It leads to kind of capital flowing out of the region and gives pressure on countries to raise their interest rates in response to the higher U.S. Fed rate.
With these economic trends expected to continue, governments will have to form policies targeted at sustainable growth. Moon Hyun, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. The European Union on Thursday decided to open accession negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova and to grant candidate status to Georgia. Ukraine's aspiration to join the European Union had been long opposed by the Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán, who had previously vetoed the move. However, at Thursday's summit in Brussels, Orbán left the room in a pre-agreed and constructive manner as the voting began, leaving the 26 other leaders to vote unanimously for the motion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this decision was a victory for Ukraine, a victory for all of Europe, and that history is made by those who don't get tired of fighting for freedom. Moldovan President Maia Sandu also welcomed the decision. Thursday's decision, however, does not guarantee EU membership status for either of the countries. The negotiation process may take years to finalize. The World Health Organization on Thursday urged governments to ban all flavored e-cigarettes. The UN Health Agency said on Thursday that urgent measures are required to control electronic cigarettes, as researchers suggest there is little evidence vaping can reduce smoking or is a healthier alternative. The WHO cited studies to state that e-cigarettes can drive nicotine addiction among non-smokers, especially children and young adults. The WHO Director General said kids are being recruited and trapped at an early age to use e-cigarettes and may get hooked to nicotine. In sports news, the English Premier League has announced its first female referee. The Professional Game Match Officials Limited confirmed on Thursday that Rebecca Welch will officiate Fulham's game against Burnley on December 23rd. 40-year-old Welch has over 10 years of experience as a football referee and in January became the first female to referee a men's championship game. Sam Allison will become the first black top-flight referee in 15 years when he oversees Sheffield United versus Luton Town on December 26th. In July, the Football Association announced plans to recruit 50% more referees from historically underrepresented backgrounds by 2026. Currently, only 3% of referees in professional football are of black or Asian ethnicity. In the U.S., a loose bull in New Jersey found its way to Newark Penn Station on Thursday morning, causing about an hour's delay for trains traveling to New York. The bull was first seen standing on the train tracks at the New Jersey station at around 11 a.m. local time. Local police cornered the bull about 5 kilometers away from the station and safely captured it. New York City's public safety director said that the bull will be sent to a local animal sanctuary. Kim Ji-young, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It has been raining all day and will rain through most of the day, but mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province will continue to see snow instead. Southern provinces will see 10 to 60 millimeters of more showers, while the capital area could see 5 to 20 millimeters of more rain. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see more than 30 centimeters of snowfall, with heavy snow alerts being issued there, so please stay safe. It was a rainy but balmy start to the day, and afternoon highs will go up similar to slightly lower than yesterday, along with strong winds. Busan topping out at 19 degrees, Jeju at 20 degrees this afternoon, still quite warmer than seasonal norms. The rain will take a break tonight before making its return tomorrow morning with a big freeze. Highs on Saturday will be minus 3 degrees here in Seoul, and Sunday's lows will plunge to minus 11. So if you plan to be outside tomorrow, make sure to dress in extra layers. Then bone chilling temperatures will stay longer than they are welcome. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. Right, and that ends this week's afternoon newscasts. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon K-food. Do stay with us.